I've got an old mule and her name is Sal, 15 years on the Erie Canal. She's a good old worker and a good old pal, 15 years on the Erie Canal. We've hauled some barges in our day, filled with lumber, coal and hay, and every inch of the way I know, from Albany to Buffalo. Low bridge, everybody down. Low bridge, we must be getting near a town. You can always tell your neighbor, you can always tell your pal, if he'd ever navigated on the Erie Canal. We'd better look round for a job, old gal, 15 years on the Erie Canal. You bet your life I wouldn't part with Sal, 15 years on the Erie Canal. Get up there, gal, we passed that lock. We'll make room for 6 o'clock.
My name's Jim. It was 1840, and I was just 10 years old when I started working as a Hoggee on the Erie Canal. A Hoggee was a Scottish name for a mule driver. Our flat-bottomed line boat carried livestock, freight like grain and apples, and immigrant settlers. It was my job to drive 2 big mules for 6 hours at a time. Those mules and I, we pulled my family's line boat along the Erie Canal. Those boats weighed tons. That's why we used mules. Why, those creatures could pull 50 times as much weight on the river as they could with a cart on a dirt road. Now, you may not believe this, but we could cover 80 miles in 24 hours. And those mules, wow, they were tough and sure-footed. Why, they could eat anything, and they never got sick. Only problem was, after a shift, when we would lower the hawse bridge to lead the mules on board the boat to rest and feed, they were stubborn creatures. They needed some encouraging to go into the small barn on the boat. Then a new team and one of my brothers would take over until it was my turn again. It was trying work. We literally walked every inch of the way from Albany to Buffalo. For a few months in the winter, when there was ice on the canal, we got to go to school. Rest of the year, my mama taught us to read from magazines in the cabin in the back of our boat, where our whole family lived. I was the oldest, so most times I worked the graveyard shift. It was dark and lonesome and monotonous, especially when there were no locks, towns, or cities to pass through. It got so dark, and I got mighty sleepy. You know, if nobody was looking, I climbed up on the back of one mule, reins in one hand, and the other hand rested on the tow line. Before I knew it, my eyes would begin to close, and my head would droop, and the next thing I knew, I was sleeping. Don't tell anyone, but sometimes at night we put rags on the mule's feet and try to sneak past the toll collector. But those shrewd collectors built net fences in the water to catch us. It was really hard work, but I really liked it. The canal was a busy, exciting place. There were a lot of packet boats. They thought they were the kings of the canal with rich passengers and tourists on board. No mules for them. Fancy horses pulled those boats. We didn't like them. Yeah, they thought they were better than everyone else. We had to move over to give them the right of way. Why, they sped down the canal at 6 to 7 miles per hour. That was way over the 4-mile-per-hour speed limit. And if they got caught, they had to pay a $10 fine. But they didn't care. More passengers, more money. Those highfalutin people would sit out on top enjoying the weather in their fine clothes. Now some of the bridges were so low that the man at the helm would call out, "Bridge, very low bridge, the lowest in the canal." And if they were too busy talking and didn't duck down, why, they got knocked into the river. People were living in family boats on the river. They had lots of kids, and wash was always on the line. Stores were springing up along the canal. We would stop to buy food and supplies. As the canal got busier and we pulled bigger loads, there was money for us kids to buy toys and candy. I remember Rupp's. That was the store I liked the best. Local people loved that canal. Grown-ups strolled on the towpaths where children played. Loggers floated timber tied together in loose rafts. We had to watch out for them. They even had horse and foot races on the towpaths. Didn't make it easy for us to get by, and Dad said time was money. Crowds gathered at the locks to watch the canal traffic go by. And there was a lot to watch. The boat traffic was mighty heavy. In 1845, there were more than 4,000 boats on the canal. We kids used to get bored waiting our turn at the locks. So we would jump in for a swim to pass the time. Other times we would entertain ourselves watching the boat captains fight each other over who was next. I remember with all them boats and only one towpath in many places, if a boat wanted to pass, I had to lower my tow line so that the other boat could pass over it. If I wasn't careful, our mules could get dragged into the river, and boy, my dad would get mad, and I wouldn't be able to sit down for a week. I worked that river for a long time. My father and mother moved to a comfortable little farmhouse, planted apple trees, and watched them blossom. I bought my own line boat and continued the life I loved. I even met Sally on the river. We married and had 5 kids of our own. But nothing seems to last forever. The Civil War began, and the happy life on the canal was replaced with fear and sorrow. I was called on to transport slaves escaping to Canada. I'm proud to say that me and my boys was part of an underground railroad. The end came when railroads began to spring up across the country. They were faster than 50 mules. People just didn't think they needed the canal anymore. As the grass started to overgrow the towpaths, I sold my boat and traded one hard job for another. I had no choice but to work for the railroad. And now don't get me wrong, I made good money, but I always missed the friends, the excitement, and the sweet fresh air on the Erie Canal.
I've got an old mule and